All right, ladies and gentlemen, let's talk about the subject to addendum. This is generally used for a purchase agreement. So we're getting a little bit ahead of ourselves, but I know you're excited about the opportunity for subject to, so I wanted to at least put this document out there so you can take a look at it, get familiar with it. Nothing wrong with using this along with a letter of intent. Let's say you're going to take a property, you negotiate a property subject to the existing debt. That usually means the seller is going to have a lot of questions. The easiest way I found to get a lot of those questions answered is to simply have them go through this agreement with them as somewhat of a tutorial and fill it all out so it's all complete, have them sign it, and then all the questions are answered and everybody can relax. So that said, starting at the top is basically an explanation of what's going on. It says that the seller agrees that the buyer is taking the property subject to the existing debt on the property. The next section there is it talks about the monthly payments and who's to make the monthly payments. And if you're the buyer, that would be you. It also talks about what the interest rate and the principal is and that type of thing. It goes on, covers some other legal mumbo jumbo and gobbledygook that we don't necessarily need to concern ourselves with, but go ahead and read through it anyway. Make sure you're familiar with it. And then on that first page, the last section is going to cover the payment of the existing loan in full and payment of the seller's equity, because let's use the $100,000 example. You're going to buy a house for $100,000. There's an $80,000 existing mortgage. You're taking the property subject to that $80,000 mortgage. Well, $100,000 minus $80,000 leaves us with $20,000. This section is going to go into addressing how we're going to get that seller that extra $20,000. So everything is clear and up front. There's no question. So that covers the first page. Next, let's go down to the second page. Here, it starts getting into the options that you as the buyer have. Sometimes you will sell it to another property or to another buyer. And in that case, language will dictate whether the loan is paid or not. Make sure, ladies and gentlemen, that the seller understand what happens in the future. You don't want them to find out. Understand that a lot of times people don't read these agreements, and it's important that you go through these agreements with them so they fully understand what they're signing for and they understand the sequence of events. The last thing you'd want to do is to commit to another end buyer, sell it to somebody else, have the seller freak out, and the transaction blow up in your face. Best bet is always disclose. Give them all the information they need. Give them this documentation. Make sure they sign it if they want to have it reviewed by their attorney. By all means, that's a great idea. Matter of fact, I even suggest them, like, here's their subject to agreement. Please send this over to your attorney. Have them review it. If they have any questions, they can get with my attorney and yada, yada, yada. Additionally, we talk about in section 3, non-assumption of the existing loan. It clarifies that we are not assuming the mortgage. We are taking the property subject to the existing mortgage, which really means that if the event I don't pay, that seller is not off the hook for that mortgage until we sell the house and satisfy the mortgage, or we refinance the house and satisfy the mortgage. We want to be very clear on that. A lot of times people take what you say and twist it to be what they want to hear. You say, hey, Mr. Seller, I'm taking the property subject to the existing mortgage. Seller hears, oh, he's assuming my loan. This section 3 says, no, we're not assuming your loan. We're taking it subject to. Additionally, there's a release of liability statement, pretty much a blanket boilerplate statement in section 4. Section 5 is the existing loan and the seller's equity price and terms estimated. So it's very important that you fill in all the blanks that apply. Now, granted, it has a second and a third loan amount. In a lot of cases, the seller only has one mortgage. But in the event they have more than one mortgage, that's going to be addressed here. And go on down the list and make sure you fill everything out to the best of your knowledge and as completely as you possibly can. The next section addresses what happens if there's any differences in the loan balance. In other words, if the seller says they owe $100,000 and they owe $150,000, it talks about how that will be adjusted, and usually it winds up being a credit to the buyer at closing. The number 7 is the due on sale clause and a transfer clause. Basically, you're telling the seller that it's possible that a due on sale clause may be triggered and how to address that. Also, it talks about any new debt or encumbrances that the seller is not going to, that's in section 8, not going to take on any new debt. The last thing you'd want is to start paying the seller's mortgage. Next thing you find out, this joker's out there taking 3-4 mortgages on his property, and you'll never be able to buy it because of all these extra mortgages. So he's basically signing that there's no other mortgages there and that they won't really put any more mortgages on it. That's to your benefit, trust me. Interest deduction talks about who gets to take the interest deduction for their taxes, right? Both people really can't take it. Now, I'm no CPA, but I would be very careful with this section. If you're going to get the interest deduction, you better darn sure make sure the seller knows that, because the seller, technically, even though they don't own the house, they own the debt, right? So they're liable for the interest. Their CPA may be saying, no, Joe, you get to take the deduction. And your CPA is saying, no, Jim, you get to take the deduction. And if you guys don't work that out in writing in advance, well, guess what's going to happen? You're both going to take the deduction. Wouldn't it be unfortunate if the IRS found out you both took the same deduction on the same mortgage for the mortgage interest? That's going to get sticky for you, and you might be looking at an audit or fines or penalties, or the seller may be in the same situation. Regardless, it'll turn a good situation and a problem-solving situation into a very bad one that will disadvantage either you or the seller or both. So to avoid all that, that's why this agreement's here. That said, boys and girls, make sure you sit down with your CPA and they help you clarify where you're at. If it were me, I would take this document, use it as a boilerplate, but I would take it to my attorney in my state, wherever I am, and make sure they're okay with the way everything's worded. Taking a property subject to there are laws on the proper ways to do things and the improper way to do things. So it helps to have a real estate attorney help you with the paperwork. These forms are intended for you to use as templates, subject to, there's that word, subject to review from your attorney. I am not an attorney, and I'm not giving legal advice. I did, although have an attorney prepare those documents. However, that attorney is an attorney in the state of Florida. So you'll want to run by your own attorney. Make sure your attorney is okay with everything as it sits. And of course, the last section is just your signature blocks. Make sure everybody signs off, and there you have it. That's that. So the subject to addendum is done.